Hi, guys. Thanks for stopping by again. I've got another story I'd like to share with you today. I hope you find it interesting. I'd like today, we'll get this blown up here. We're going to talk about my great great grandfather and grandmother. Get the thing off here. This is Alexander Lewis, and this is his wife, my great great grandmother, Margaret Hopkins Lewis. And tell you a little bit about them. I think you might find this a little bit interesting today. In this picture also, I'm going to pull this down just a little bit. This guy here in the center, this is Thomas Craddock Lewis, who is my great-grandfather. And we're going to save him and talk about him another time. So we're going to talk about these two right here today. Grandpa Lewis, I'm just going to call him Grandpa Lewis. He's my great-great-grandfather, Alexander Lewis. Was born in a place called Merthyr Tydfil, Wales. He is Welsh, as is great-great-grandma, Margaret Lewis. I actually, several years ago, had a business trip to England, and I took a day and took the train out to Merthyr Tydfil just to see the town, what it was like. And I thought it'd be interesting to look around. And I went to the old courthouse and asked if there were any old records or anything. And they told me no, that there had been a fire and most of the town records had been destroyed. And that made me kind of sad. But I went and looked at the phone book. I thought, well, I wonder if there's any Lewises in the phone book here in this little town in Wales. And found a phone book in a payphone. They still had phone booths back then. And I think there was something like double columned in the phone book. There must have been 4 or 5 pages, 2 columns per page of Lewis's. So there's still a lot of Lewis's around, and I just thought that was kind of interesting. So anyway, Grandpa Lewis, we get the whole picture up here. Grandpa Lewis was born in Wales, and he was born, his father, the term that they use is a roll turner. And his father was, got it right here, Edward Lewis. He was a roll turner, worked in a steel mill. And basically a roll turner is one who works at the roller mills in milling steel. And I think it's pretty good work, and apparently it paid quite well. And he went to some of the best schools. And it turns out that age 16, Alexander also became a roll turner, and he went to work at a different steel mill, but he did that starting at age 16. Not long after he met, he was about that time still a young man. So he started, it was actually that same year. So in his 16th year, he had a chance to meet the missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he joined the 14th of July, 1849. He joined the church, and he was heavily criticized by his family and his friends, and was the first member of the family to join the church, and took a lot of grief because of it. Now, having said that, Alexander was a very good singer. He had a beautiful tenor voice. And at the age of 18, he was conducting one of the largest Welsh choirs in all of Wales. And the account here says that Grandpa Alex was a very handsome man with blue eyes, dark hair, and extra fair skin. He was 5'10", 5 feet 10 inches tall, and walked very straight with a quick step. With that, he caught the eye of Margaret Hopkins, and they were married in 1852 and had 7 children that were all born in Wales. Many of them died, and actually within a 10-year period, they lost 4 of their children very quickly, and that was brought great sorrow to both Alexander and Margaret. Make sure we're still going here. Now, in 1869, they saved up and they came to America, and they went directly to Cache Valley, Utah. And Margaret's mother was already living here in the United States, along with a couple of her other brothers and sisters, and they moved in with her home, Margaret's mother. And Alex didn't like that very much, so they worked very hard, very quickly to get a place of their own. And it said that they were, Alex was employed by the tithing office up in Cache Valley. And all the members of the church would bring their tithing to the tithing office. And this wasn't cash like we do nowadays, where you put your money in the envelope and give it to the bishop. There they would bring in things like vegetables, butter, corn, wheat, chickens, and hay. And then they would be sold, or if people needed something, they would go talk to their bishop, and he would make out a list, and then the people could go to the tithing office and collect up what they needed. Today we have what's known as the bishop's storehouse, and we do similar things, but I think you'd be hard-pressed to get hay or anything like that at the bishop's storehouse. Usually it's canned stuff nowadays. So, but grandfather would make out the lists and get the produce, and he kept the books for many years, and then went to the storehouse to work. They about 6 miles west of Logan, Alexander purchased a small farm, and the address was 432 West Center Street. I have not yet looked online, Google Maps, to see if that's still there or what's there now. But he was a very hard worker, and they raised horses, chickens, cows, had a very large vegetable garden, and also a very wonderful flower garden. Alexander really loved roses, and he would trade some of his favorite blooms for some of the other varieties that he could find that people would share with him in Cache Valley. It says that he had a beautiful black racehorse that his name was Slivers, and he also had a one-seated buggy. And it said that this was the envy of all the young men up in Cache Valley, because they would see this beautiful racehorse and this buggy, and all the young men thought, boy, if I had one of those, that would really help in their dating scene, because all the girls, it would turn heads, I guess. I don't know what the equivalent is nowadays. I was going to say a Camaro, but that's pretty dated. Maybe a fancy convertible or something. Anyway, there is a note here, and I should give credit. This is an account written by his granddaughter, or one of his granddaughters, that she writes here. And she said that actually that horse actually turned the head of Margaret too. She really thought that was pretty neat. He eventually had to he sold Slivers to a guy that was involved with racehorses in Wyoming, and he bought another horse. His name was Nig. He says it wasn't nearly as pretty as Slivers, but at least he was happy to have a horse, and there were a lot of people that didn't, so that was good. What I found interesting is that Alexander and Margaret's home actually became a type of a gathering place for all the Welsh immigrants who were coming in to Cache Valley. And people would come and stay with them, and Margaret realized that maybe they could capitalize on this a bit. And so what they did is Margaret had the idea to take in boarders. That was people who could rent rooms from Alexander and Margaret, and they lived about 2 blocks from the main line of the railroad, and people were always begging to come there, and so they started taking in boarders. And there were a number of them that stayed for quite a period of time, and one of these boarders, renters, that was there was a young man from Wales by the name of Evan Stevens, and that's a name that you may recognize as in the hymn books. He actually produced, or he wrote the words and music, and sometimes the words and music, for a lot of the hymns that we have in the hymn book today. And he lived with Grandpa Alexander and Grandma Margaret for about 2 years there in Cache Valley. And actually, Grandpa Alex and Evan Stevens would compose and write a number of hymns that they worked together on. And actually, Alexander became the choir leader for a very good choir up in Cache Valley. I think they called it let's see if I can find it here real quick. The Logan Tabernacle Choir. And that was in 1871. He was set apart to be that choir leader. And it gained a lot of notoriety. In fact, it says that was the choir that furnished the music for the dedication of the Salt Lake Temple. And the note here says that Grandpa Alex received many compliments from both Wilford Woodruff and Lorenzo Snow for the very fine service that they put on. And at the time, Evan Stevens was working as the organist for the Logan Tabernacle Choir, and Grandpa Alexander was the choir director, and there was a whole list of names. Actually, in one of the papers I found, there's a whole list of all the choir members, and I thought that was kind of interesting. Now, I think that's pretty much what I wanted to share. Oh, other than the fact that later in his life, in 1901, the Logan City School Board of Education appointed Alexander Lewis as the music director of all the city schools. So he has always had a great love for music, and being appointed there for the city schools in Logan to take care of all the music department. Right after that appointment was made, he got a call to go down to Salt Lake and to take over and lead the Salt Lake Tabernacle Choir, which would eventually become known as the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. Well, Alexander felt that he was too old at this time to give up his home and to move to Salt Lake, and so he declined the offer, but he recommended a young man that he had known very well and had a great love for music and a great talent, and so he nominated Evan Stevens for the brethren to consider as him taking over the Salt Lake Tabernacle Choir. Well, that worked out well, and actually Evan Stevens was the director of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir for something like 30 years after that. And of course, I also found out Evan Stevens published something like 300 songs, including 60 children's songs, none of which are now in the children's hymn book, which I thought was kind of interesting. I don't know where those are or how many of them Grandpa Alexander was involved with, but I thought that was kind of fascinating on that. Yeah, that's pretty much, he served, Grandpa Alexander served as the director of the Logan Tabernacle Choir for almost 33 years, and was still leading the choir up until 1913 when he was retired at that point, or released from the calling. It says he was presented at that point with a gold-headed cane, a ring, and a pen and a pencil. No idea where those have gone or what's happened to them, but I think, I know in our family we have a lot of musical talent. I think we can take great pride in the fact that we had a ancestor who had a very dear and great love for not only nature, one who really loved the outdoors and loved, especially with his roses, which I guess were quite stunning, but also had a great love of bearing his testimony through the sharing of songs and through music, and being able to collaborate with Evan Stevens, I think, was kind of a neat thing that we have in our family. So I wanted to share that with you. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.